Open source software creates $400 billion of economic value per year. There's just no one that's able to make any money by providing open source software. It's provided for free as a public good to the world. And one of the problems with this is because there's no money in open source software, people will only build it on nights and weekends away from their families. They can't get paid for it, so they have to go and get a job at a bank or some technology company and go work on ad tech in order to make ends meet. And so it felt like this huge asymmetry in value created for the world and value captured in the world that open source software developers were not getting funded. I think that having Gitcoin focused on open source software development funding is aimed at correcting that asymmetry between value creation and value captured. For me, it feels like it's not only about the humanistic helping the open source software developers get funded, but it's also about that imbalance also creates black swan events. There was an issue in 2013 where there was a bug at the heart of SSL, which is what secures all of the internet. The Open SSL Foundation was funded on less than $1 million despite securing the entire internet. And so when there's no money available for building our digital infrastructure will crumble. And so it's about creating more secure and solid foundations for our infrastructure as much as it is helping the people who are building that infrastructure. My name is Kevin Owocki. I'm the founder of Gitcoin. Gitcoin is a place that you can get coins. We funded $60 million worth of Ethereum-based infrastructure, open source software, and culture. Our primary product is Getcoin Grants. Getcoin Grants is a way that you can fund what matters in your community. And so we're a tool where if you have a DAO or an EVM-based ecosystem, you can give out tokens in exchange for people doing work in that ecosystem. And likewise, if you're someone who's just entering Web3 and you're trying to figure out where you belong, building a Getcoin Grant profile is a great way for you to start to get coins in exchange for doing work in the space in a way that's a little bit more like sticking your toe in the water as opposed to going in full time before you're really sure what you want to do yet. Yeah, in the next market cycle, my vision would be that everyone across the world can earn via crypto and can pay their rent and put food on the table by providing value to their communities. And I think that would be such a profound thing for places across the world that are economically underdeveloped, and we have rising authoritarianism and backlashes because there are no jobs. If we can provide jobs via crypto, I think that would be a huge good for the world. And the fact that it's bringing crypto mainstream is only a secondary effect of that. I think you can't confuse the means with the ends. But yeah, it's about providing value to everyday people. And I think if Gitcoin can be a way that everyday people can get coins, that provides a lot of economic sustainability and reliability for them in their everyday lives. And I'm excited about a vision of the world where everyone's first experience with crypto is not speculating on something, but instead earning a living using the infrastructure. Yeah, we'll see if we're able to do that, but I think there's a profound opportunity to create more economic opportunities for people across the world. But I also think a really interesting opportunity would be if more people could work for the public good. If you could earn for doing valuable things in your community, then that would be a huge counterweight to I think the Web 2 attention economy, where you have to earn by grabbing more eyeballs and increasingly creating hypernormal stimuli for people just so that they can sell ads against it. I think that Web 3 provides an opportunity for us to build economic models that are about providing value in communities, and that's really what I hope Gitcoin's ongoing legacy will be. Quadratic Funding is basically a matching campaign where contributions from the crowd are matched by funds from a central matching pool. Basically, the way it works is that a community will set up a matching pool on Getcoin Grants. The most famous is the Ethereum community. And then projects that are doing good within that community will register for a Getcoin Grants campaign. And then what happens is that contributions from the crowd in the crowdfunding campaign are matched with contributions from the central matching pool. But there's like one weird trick with Quadratic Funding, and that's that the number of contributors supporting each project matters more than the amount funded. If I were to raise $10 from one contributor and you were to raise $10 from 10 different contributors, in that scenario with Quadratic Funding, you would get way more of the matching pool. With a one-to-one matching, we would get the same amount. And with quadratic funding, you would get like 95% of the matching pool because you have the broader base of support. And what's really powerful about quadratic funding is that it enables contributions from the edges of the network to really allocate the capital of what's an important public good in these communities. And I think that that's a really important thing, is to empower everyday citizens to govern where the treasuries in these ecosystems goes, as opposed to just a central grant administrator who gets to become a power broker and gets to fund these ecosystems. So quadratic funding is sort of a really democratic way of doing funding within Web3 based ecosystems, and we hope cities, states, and townships across the world one day. I'm really excited to bring some of these ideas mainstream. Getcoin's launching a tool called simplegrants.xyz that's going to allow anyone to do quadratic funding in their local community. And I think the opportunity here is to bring quadratic funding mainstream, upgrade our democratic institutions for the 21st century. And what if local cities and states and countries could be doing quadratic funding in order to have a more 21st century native democracy, fund what matters to everyday citizens, enable opportunities to earn for doing good in your community? I think that there's just a huge opportunity to upgrade our institutions for the 21st century, to fund what matters, to create an upward spiral of community engagement and collective action that really helps a lot of people across the world. And in a time where there's rising authoritarianism and people are questioning democracy, I think that it's incumbent upon us to upgrade democracy for the 21st century. So quadratic funding is maybe one way that we could do that, but it's not the only way. And I think we have to come up with a pluralistic series of approaches where democracy can feel a little bit more 21st century native and keep up with the times. And that's the opportunity that, for me, bringing quadratic funding mainstream will do. So we actually ran a pilot of mainstream quadratic funding back in 2020. If you remember, in 2020, COVID was ravaging the world. And in my hometown of Boulder, Colorado, businesses were having a hard time staying afloat. And so basically what we did was we ran a quadratic funding campaign. It was called Downtown Stimulus, and it was basically meant to be a stimulus to the downtown. We had local businesses sign up that were having a hard time making rent because their foot traffic had just dropped 99%. And so we funded a comic book shop, a yoga studio, a bookstore, and a couple other businesses using quadratic funding. And so basically just keeping the downtown livable and doing an economic stimulus program for Boulder, Colorado was the thing that we proved out. And the cool thing is that the economics of quadratic funding just work the same way in crypto as they do in the real world, which I think was really validating for us. The vision for the future of quadratic funding in downtowns would be to stimulate bottoms up community engagement for providing value for the communities. And so I think that there's a really big design space for what that could be used for. The signs of bottoms-up community engagement that I really like in my hometown of Boulder, Colorado, are things like the little free libraries that are on the corner of different neighborhoods where you can just take a book or give a book. The local farmers market is another example of that. Street artists that are on the street corners of these communities. So those are the community goods that I recognize in my local communities, and that's where my mind goes in terms of what I would like to see funded. But the cool thing about quadratic funding is that it doesn't matter what the person who's running the campaign thinks is cool. What matters is the constituency and what they think is cool in these communities. So I'm excited to see, once we put the mechanism out live, what kind of collective action and community goods start to arise out of that. And part of the key of it is that I'm not in control of it. We're just creating the mechanism through which other people can express their preferences. And I think there's something beautiful about that. I'm known primarily for quadratic funding. And well, actually, it's funny that I'm known for quadratic funding because Vitalik Buterin, Glenn Weil, and Zoe Hitzig invented it, and I'm just kind of the person who's bringing it forward, and so I just want to make sure that they get credit for quadratic funding. I'm known for quadratic funding, and Gitcoin 1.0 in a lot of ways was built on quadratic funding, but Gitcoin 2.0 is going to be more of a Swiss Army knife that makes available different capital allocation methodologies to the world. The first will be quadratic funding, our bread and butter. The second is retroactive public goods funding, which is a mechanism pioneered by Optimism that allows communities to retroactively fund what matters to their communities. And there's a long tail of capital allocation strategies that I'm excited about from there that will probably also add to the Swiss Army knife. Things like conviction voting or direct to contract incentives or angel investing 3.0. There's going to be a lot of different ways that we're going to fund what matters to communities on chain. And I'm really excited about this because I think it's going to enable massively multiplayer online finance. Blockchains enable us to build more scalable, precise, and democratic capital allocation than has ever existed before because we can program our values into our money, right? Gitcoin's basically just trying to productize these capital allocation methodologies and make them available to everyday people so that we can create that bottoms-up spiral of community engagement and collective action. So, I think that it's a real privilege to be able to do something that makes money and also aligns with your values. And that's what I would hope for anyone out there, is that you can make rent and you can put food on the table for your family and do something that aligns with your values. And it really speaks to how out of touch we've become as a society with our own values, that so many people are forced to make that trade-off. I think that I'm really privileged to be able to work on something that aligns with my values and can help other people do work that's aligned with their values. It's sort of fractal in that way. I never guessed that I would be on this route when I was a kid.